Welcome to Macon Memories. I'm Lynda Wright at Randolph-Macon College, and today is April 16th, 2018. I'm here today with Jack Trammell, sociology professor at the college, and I want to start by asking you, Jack, tell us how you happened to come to Randolph-Macon.
I came to Randolph-Macon through a series of unusual events. Back in 2000, the education department here was run by Brenda Gilman and Brenda Davis, and it was affectionately referred to as the Brenda and Brenda Show. And I knew Brenda and Brenda through their connection to Hanover County schools, and I had taught in Hanover County for I think 8 or 9 years at that point, was a special education and social studies teacher for Hanover. And they were interested in my research on disability that I had started at Liberty Middle School and Patrick Henry High School, and I'd published a few little things. And they encouraged me to connect with Sherry Schlinke, who at the time was running disability support services for the college. And Sherry offered me a chance to work part-time in the academic center as a kind of graduate assistant, and I became connected with the college through that. Sherry unexpectedly left to go to Florida because of an opportunity her daughter had, and there were folks who had gotten to know me and said, well, you've been helping her part-time. Would you like to step into this role? You have a master's degree in special education and education. You might be interested in doing this. And I said, sure. And so I interviewed, and Ira Andrews interviewed me and hired me. I love Ira, and Ira was very good to give me a chance to get started full-time at Randolph-Macon. I'll never forget, during the interview for my job, he had a question. He said, I see you have a degree. You have a time you were at UVA and got your special ed certificate, and you have a time you're at VCU and got your master's in education. Which school is better? And he paused, and I thought, and I looked up on the wall to see what degrees he had, and I finally said, they're very different schools, but they're both wonderful schools in their own right. And Ira clapped his hands and said, great answer. And so I passed the Ira Andrews test, and I got hired. And from there, my journey at Randolph-Macon began as full-time. At that time, it was called Coordinator of Disability Support Services.
Mm-hmm. Was it the Higgins Academic Center at that time?
Yes. And just like Brenda and Brenda were the education show, the other person working in the academic center at that time was Dr. Jennifer Bruce, and Jenny was part of the team that hired me initially, and Jenny and I became very close colleagues, and people affectionately called the hack the Jack and Jenny show, because we did everything in partnership, including the tutoring and mentoring program. I did a lot of work with her, and she did a lot of work with disability with me. And even though we had formal job descriptions and jobs that we were responsible for, the partnership was very synergistic.
Mm-hmm. Well, great. Thank you so much for the Ira Andrews story, too. I can't count how many interviews I've done that Ira is like at the beginning of each one connection. So
well, I'm here because of Ira, and so I will always be grateful to him for that.
Yeah, thank you. Well, so you want to talk a little bit more about the Jack and Jenny show? I'm interested in how disability support services evolved during your time here.
When I came, Sherry Schlinke had done a wonderful job of studying the law and implementing some of the initial programs to help students with disabilities here at the school. I was the fortunate recipient of that, which allowed me to work toward the second level, which meant not only having these programs, but making them work better and looking at the next type of thing that could be offered. So, for example, Sherry had studied foreign language substitution and had a lot of court cases that she made reference to, but her work enabled me to crystallize a policy on foreign language substitution that made sense to all the constituencies on campus and is still used now. And so Sherry did a lot of the groundwork, and then it allowed me to go to the next level and make those policies more sophisticated, enforce them consistently, and to help encourage students, because many students were at Randolph-Macon already, but were not taking advantage of the help they could get.
Thank you, and I know that just continues to grow and continues to be a big need.
It does,
and
indeed.
Service at the college. So thank you for that groundwork. You've had so many different roles and responsibilities at Randolph-Macon. I'm just going to pick one and we'll go from there. But talk about your work with the honors program.
The honors program is a wonderful program, and it's been evolving over the 17 years that I've been here. It's had different looks. It's had different leaders in charge. It's had different evolutions in its mission. But my time as assistant director and director must have been 5 or 6 years at least. I'm not sure what that total time was, but that was a wonderful, wonderful experience. And one of the really rewarding things that I did here was to be in charge of exceptionality, in essence. The students who were exceptional in terms of honors, the students who were exceptional in terms of disability support, the students who were exceptional in terms of being tutors and mentors and being top students at the college and experts in their content areas. And so there was a point at time here where I was Mr. Exceptional, and I was working with all of these different exceptional groups of students. The state of Florida does this. They have their special education program and their gifted program folded into one office of exceptionality. And for a while, I thought Randolph-Macon might do the same thing. And so that was a wonderful experience. And honor students here continue to be, and were when I was running and helping with honors, just a terrific group of people who are so talented. We never really fully realize their talent until years later we see the incredible things they do.
And the tutoring program is so important to, I mean, it's a fabulous service. So.
It's important not only to students who want the help, it also supports 75 students who are top students on campus who get to challenge themselves to learn more about pedagogy, to learn more about how you can transfer your experience and your knowledge and expertise from your own mind and framework to somebody else's situation. And so it benefits everybody.
Good, great. Also during your time, I believe that while you were at the Higgins Academic Center, you were the director of summer school for several years.
Yes, that's right.
Another hat. Would you like to talk about?
Yes, and I am very proud of my time doing these various things. One of the things that I developed during my summer school tenure was a formula for cost and income per seat in classroom in the summer session. And it allowed us to compare summer sessions and come up with a formula that would make it economically viable and beneficial to the college to have the summer program, but also to plan for the number of classes that would be offered, to plan for the number of students that should be in each class. And I was able to demonstrate to the president and the administration that summer school was a very beneficial program, not only academically, but economically as well. The summer session was also fun because, as Susan Parker knows now, you in essence act as a mini dean in the summer because other people are away, and you have to make decisions about the summer session, and you're the first line of defense when issues come up or challenges. And so that was another wonderful experience that I really am grateful for.
Well, that administrative experience will be very helpful for you going forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. Well, you also, while you were a full-time staff member doing all these other things, you taught classes. You were a member of the teaching faculty as well. So can you talk about what courses you taught and getting into the teaching role?
Well, I've always chosen courses to teach that relate to my interest in exceptionality. So, for example, in the honors program, one of my more popular courses is Monsters in Modernism. And it's a course that looks at why humans fixate on their differences rather than their similarities. And the Monsters course starts off with comic books and graphic novels and movies, and students think that it's really fun, but then they realize about halfway through the course that really it's a philosophical kind of course where we're delving into great questions that have never been solved, like why gender matters, why race matters, why otherness matters, why disability or ability matters. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's always been a favorite course, and that was one of the earliest courses I offered, and I've offered it in different formats. I took one group to Romania where we followed the historical trail of the real Dracula,
Mm-hmm.
and that was an amazing course experience. But I also have taught a lot of courses in sociology about disability, and that's ended up being my niche. My colleagues at other schools consider me a disability studies professor
Mm-hmm.
more than anything else.
Mm-hmm. And is that what you will continue going forward?
Yes.
That area.
That's right.
What you, very good. Can you talk just a little bit about how you balanced all of that? I'm just amazed at all the writing you've done while you were teaching, and wondered if you ever sleep.
Mm-hmm.
But you know that you've done outside writing and research while you were teaching, and just sort of if you had any secrets about balancing.
Well, I have done workshops for my higher ed colleagues, and I did them for my secondary colleagues when I worked for Hanover County about how to balance this. And for example, in Hanover County, I showed teachers how the work they do in assessment for the standards of learning and for their own requirements at the job, they actually are engaging in data collection that they also could write about and use for their own research careers and their own writing interest. Now, there are, of course, disclosure, privacy. There's some things you can use and some things you can't use, but many people don't realize how much of their daily work could actually be of interest to somebody else who is doing the same thing. So we all know about conferences and going and giving presentations, but I do some workshops where I encourage people to actually journal when they're working and to turn those into written pieces that they can use to publish other places. So much of my writing career has actually been just writing about what I do. And we all are doing our job every day, but we don't think about writing about it or turning it into something that we can share with others, except for those formal situations where it's a conference. I've done the same thing in higher ed, where I've talked to professionals about choices that we make. Some days I'll make a choice to go and eat with my colleagues. Some days I'll choose to stay in my office and just write for 20 minutes on something that I want to publish. And people will be surprised at how many 20-minute chunks add up to having a product. And it's just the discipline to actually carve out a few of those 20 minutes here, 20 minutes there. And we all are supposed to get our 15-minute break twice a day, right? And instead of going and smoking a cigarette out on the lawn, there's nothing wrong with that, I guess, except the health risk. But I would stay at my desk and I would just write on one of these little projects. And so there are some secrets to multitasking, and I think I've benefited from some of those. The other thing about teaching is I usually taught one course per semester when I was a staff person. And I always told my superiors and I always told other people and colleagues that that was my sanity. That was my lifeline, because it allowed me to see my work in a different light. On the staff side, I was often in the trenches. When I taught the course, I was able to see the other side of that work and to see students actually struggling in a classroom, to see the issues that faculty deal with students. And it really actually helped me be better at the work that I was doing as a staff person.
I can see that. You're just seeing the application of it, and then you're able to bring that back in a sort of full circle. Yeah, very good. Well, in 2016, you moved from full-time staff position to a full-time faculty member, joining the sociology and anthropology department. Can you describe that change of becoming a full-time faculty member and what that was like?
Well, I think when I went back and got my PhD, I finished in 2006, and all of my friends in the PhD program left their current roles and jobs, and they went to other big universities. And I chose to come back to Randolph-Macon and stay in my staff role. And that was a career decision that was tough, because like them, I wanted to go to a bigger school and I wanted to research and I wanted to expand and be a full-time professor, teaching professor. But the choice to come back to Randolph-Macon was in part because my children and stepchildren were planning or actively were coming here. And so part of the decision to make my career at Randolph-Macon was based on my children wanting to be here at this place. And I did end up having a number of my kids and stepkids come here and graduate. So that was part of the equation. And during the time my children were here, I turned down many full-time teaching offers at other schools, and some of them were wonderful places. But with my last two kids graduating in 2016, that was actually the year I made the transition to full-time teaching here in the sociology department. And it wasn't a coincidence in the sense that that was my career path, and I was just trying to help my kids be in a familiar place. They got a tuition benefit by me working here. And so that was part of my career track, was to get them on their way. And so once that happened, I'd always intended to teach full-time.
Well, great. That's wonderful. Wonderful for us that worked out that way, and wonderful for them.
Yes, and they are very fortunate to have a good Randolph-Macon education.
Well, that really speaks well of Randolph-Macon, that you would guide your own career path to enable them to be here, and I think that speaks well of everyone.
It worked out for everyone, I think.
Yeah. Well, I would like to explore that just a little bit. So you were a staff member, and worked a lot with students, on both sides, exceptionality both ways, teaching, but being a parent, you're seeing things, you're on the other side of the fence a little bit. Was there anything surprising about that experience of being a Randolph-Macon parent to you?
It was very surprising. I had one of my children register with the Office of Disability Support Services, and I found myself in the strange position of being a parent and an administrator, and I had to wear my hats carefully. And I also worked with my colleagues like Jenny and Lauren Bell to make sure that any decision making about my own student was not something where I had my parent hat on instead of my staff hat. But it also really reinforced some of the core ideas I have about social justice and a fair shot at proving yourself at the college level. And so I've always been very empathetic with other parents who are concerned about their kids struggling. Even though we treat students as adults here in the eyes of the law, and in other ways we try to treat them as adults too, parents are obviously very concerned and sometimes get overly involved. And some of our current staff know that very well. But I'm very empathetic to parents, having had my own kids go through school, and almost anything that I saw with other students, I experienced with one of my 7 kids, 4 stepkids or 3 kids.
That's very interesting. Well, I'm the parent of our RMC students, so I know what you mean. It's at some level, seeing things from a different side, right?
For sure.
I do want to just touch, I know you touched on this a little bit, but I do want to acknowledge for the record that you have been a prolific scholar and writer. You've written many works of Virginia history and fiction and poetry, and obviously the nonfiction. We talked about how you balance that, but I wondered if you wanted to just speak about your wide interest and your publishing and writing interest.
Well, I've always been interested in writing from a very early age. My parents noticed that I liked writing for writing's sake, and so I didn't even need a motivation or an assignment at school. I have boxes of just random things that I wrote for my own pleasure when I was, a preteen and so on. And so I've always loved writing. And one of the wonderful things about coming to Randolph-Macon was it was less of a struggle here than in the public schools to write, because as part of your staff role, you write reports, you write a lot of things, policies and other things. And as an academic, you're supposed to write. And so I found myself in higher education in the unique position and the wonderful position of actually having a job where you're paid to research and write. And although my staff role was many, many things, it also included reading and writing, and that was core to my being anyway. And I haven't been locked in a genre. I love writing many different ways. And so, since I originally come from Appalachia, I was born in Berea, Kentucky. I've always been interested in writing about Appalachia, and I have been involved at Shepherd University and their Appalachian Literature Project. I'm on their board. I have published some things in some of their journals and their anthologies. And so creative writing, like academic writing, is something I just love to do. And when I have the spare time, I do it. And I also love writing about social history because it combines my interest in sociology and in more academic kind of frameworks for looking at the world with my love of writing just about things in general. And so social history has sort of become a niche for me. And some people even have me talk about social history as a niche in sociology that some people would say an expert in.
Mm-hmm. Well, and writing begets writing.
Yes,
you know,
it does,
so I think
indeed.
you made a good point about in your positions that you had here that you have to write, so that makes the words start to flow a little better if you're already doing some.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's excellent. Well, I would like to talk about 2014.
Of course.
We have to talk about that. Well, I'll just let you tell the story rather than my setting it up. But you're running your run for the House of Representatives for the Virginia's 7th District.
Well, for those who haven't heard the story, I really had no intention of this becoming anything like what it was. The Democrats were, unlike the current year, 2018, where they have many candidates, were desperate for candidates to oppose seats. And there were many races across the state of Virginia and nationally where people ran unopposed. And people believed that the system would be better if you had multiple candidates, multiple parties, and there was a debate of ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the 7th Congressional District, I was one of presumably 17 candidates, but the other 16 really never materialized for one reason or another. And one person might have gone to jail for something, another person might have been in bankruptcy court, and it sounded like I was the only person who wasn't in trouble somehow or who was a viable candidate. And the Democrats were very happy about having a candidate. Now, my team that I put together initially understood that I had very little chance of defeating Eric Cantor, although I didn't necessarily accept that. Everybody else pretty much felt, well, let's make a good effort. Let's show them that you can't just run unopposed. But as we know, history happened and Dave Bratt upset Eric Cantor, and then everything changed. The night that Eric Cantor was upset, I was giving a talk in Louisa County to some folks. It was a room of about 15 people, and somebody interrupted my speech and yelled to the whole room, "Oh my gosh, Cantor's losing, Cantor's lost, Cantor's lost," and the whole room erupted into chaos, and I didn't even get to finish giving my speech.
And this was the primary. He lost.
Yes,
right.
This was in the primary, and many of my colleagues and friends here don't even know this story, that I suddenly my phone blew up. I had messages from former presidents and candidates and people at the top of the party, and I got a mysterious phone call from the director of the state party who said, "Don't tell anyone where you are, get in your car, and I'm going to tell you where to drive." They took me to an undisclosed location at a hotel in Richmond on the top floor where they had rows of laptops and people. One person was saying, "We need to know what your bank is. Tell us who you bank with, and we're going to make sure that you're secure and nobody can get into your personal finances." Another person said, "We need to log into your Facebook and sanitize what's in your Facebook." Another person at a laptop said, "I need to know what your email account is besides the one at Randolph-Macon, and we want to make sure they're secure from other people bothering them." Another person on a laptop said, "We've just set up an ActBlue account for you, and there's already like $20,000 in there." And so it was insane. And Audrey was trying to call me, and she didn't know where I was. And all these news agencies were trying to find me, and it was a night I'll never forget. And my life changed forever. And my reason in telling this story too is because the college changed forever at that point too. We had media on campus. We had the two professors. We had the debate with the president and his two faculty members. Just so many wonderful things came out of that. But it was a crazy beginning that nobody predicted.
Nobody, and right. That's a wild story. Well, I remember the day after economics professor here at Randolph-Macon, Dave Bratt, upset Eric Cantor. I think they were just media walking around. They were taking pictures of the fountain, and it was some live news and some, just still photographs. And somebody stopped me on the sidewalk from the Washington Post, I think, and said, "Hey, do you work here?" And of course, at that point, the news cycle was really about Dave Bratt.
Right.
But we had gotten an email first thing in the morning from the president: "Do not talk to you. Refer the media to the marketing department." So all I could say was, "Yes, I work here, and you'll need to speak with the marketing department." You couldn't. Not that I wouldn't have known what to say anyway. But yeah, it was a wild time.
I remember sitting in my office in the HAC in disability support, and reporters from the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, a whole host. It was probably about between half a dozen and a dozen reporters all swarming into and around my office and taking pictures and wanting to, they formed a queue to come in and interview me briefly. And after that, the provost talked to me and said, for your sake and for our sake, they have to go through marketing, because I couldn't meet with students and even do my work. And so it was very amazing, but nutty kind of time.
Yeah. Oh, I bet. Well, so did you, so let's see, the primary would have been in May, June.
It was in June, yeah.
And then there was the race coming up in November, and you and Dave Bratt. And so then we had the debate.
Right.
You want to talk about that?
That was an amazing event too. We were both in the unique position of being at our home institution with our boss moderating.
Right.
And so I thought all along we would both have to be on our best behavior. And that was really one of my favorite moments during the campaign, because as I looked out across the audience, I knew everybody. I knew all the alums I saw, all the faculty colleagues and staff colleagues. I saw students that I teach in class or help in the HAC. I saw my family and some of my kids. And I realized that win or lose the election, that's just one of those moments where it's special and it's amazing, and it'll probably never happen again.
Yeah, that was such a interesting time, and it really put Randolph-Macon on the map for that election cycle. People were talking about, these two professors.
I hope that will be part of my legacy here, is that there will be a footnote in history for Randolph-Macon forever, that this was the place where the two professors duked it out for the seat in Congress.
Well, I'm sure it will be. Do you have any other political, or you look into any other political campaigns or opportunities?
I've had lots of people in the party and even in the other party ask me, some Republicans have asked me to switch parties and run for them, since I'm a little fiscally conservative, but I'm socially liberal. So yeah, a lot of people have tried to encourage me, but I have ended up deciding I needed to pursue my writing career. One thing that suffered during that campaign, since you have talked about this with me, was my writing.
Sure.
I couldn't even write my own speeches sometimes, because my staff and the people around me had a particular message they wanted branded on the campaign, and so I wasn't even able to express the freedom in my speech writing that I wanted to ultimately. Now, that was a choice on my part. I could have taken more control of that, but I also was trying to trust the people who I'd entrusted to do their jobs. And so running for office is a tough thing, and empathize with everybody. I empathize with Dave's family.
Yeah.
And so that's not an easy thing to do.
Well, some more writing opportunities about that, I'm sure, will be
I
in your
have
future.
written a lot about
Yeah.
the campaign, and that's fun to write about. Some of these stories are wonderful stories.
And as you get a little more distance, I can see that you might keep going back to that well. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, speaking of writing history, and if you were writing the history of Randolph-Macon College, what other things would you want to include from your 17 years here?
I think some remarkable changes have taken place. James Scanlon, of course, has written a 2-volume history, but I wrote a 4-part history in the alumni magazine a few years ago, and I have a great appreciation for the history of this place. And I think that what I've witnessed during my time are important changes in terms of diversity. We've tried to bring female faculty salaries more into line with male salaries, for example. We have quintupled the percentage of students of color here since I've been here. We have become much more accessible to students with learning difficulties or with disabilities. And so I would say part of the legacy or the history of the 17 years plus I've been here would be Randolph-Macon becoming more inclusive. It doesn't mean we don't have work to do. We do have work to do, and I would want to be clear that we want to keep working toward that. But we've really made some remarkable changes. We have expanded the student population, so even just being several hundred students larger than when I came has changed things, and in a good way, I think. We have a vibrant community. And I think that we have improved our faculty and staff. We have a really great human capital here that we take advantage of. And I know everybody would always like to be paid more, and I know they'd like to be appreciated more, but we have some terrific people here, and I think we're fortunate. So that's the legacy of the 17 years, too, is seeing some of our veterans retire. James Scanlon, I already mentioned, Tom Porter, another friend of mine from history, but seeing the younger faculty come in too. Cedar Reiner, for example, has played basketball with me. And so Randolph-Macon is really evolving in a positive way, I think.
Thank you. Well, are there any other memories or stories about Randolph-Macon that we haven't touched on you'd like to share?
Well, I have lots of memories. For example, every day creates some kind of memory. Just to pull one randomly, I was taking students on a haunted tour of campus because I have an interest in ghosts, and we went into Wash Frank and we looked around, and then we went into 206 North Center Street, and I was telling a spooky story, and all of a sudden something clattered upstairs and along the stairs, and the students screamed. And I thought, oh my goodness, what have I gotten us into here? And then this is like 10 o'clock at night, it's very dark, and suddenly this sheepish face appears at the top of the stairs, and it's Scott London. He says, I'm sorry, I didn't know you guys were in here. I'm just working late on grading papers. And we all breathed a sigh of relief and thought, well, okay, we got a logical explanation this time. But things happen all the time. I remember with Professor Fischbach, a anti-war protest where there were crosses for all of the American lives lost that we planted in the grass. And there's just amazing things happening here all the time. And so all those memories will go with me forward from here.
Well, thank you, Jack Trammell, and congratulations on your appointment as chair of the Sociology Department at Mount St. Mary's University.
Thank you.
Best wishes, and we will miss you. But thank you for coming in to Making Memories.
Absolutely. Thank you.